When the time comes,
Yes.
if she wanted to run, she would be.
Absolutely.
She would be.
Yep.
Hot mic,
Oh, yeah.
hot mic. Goodness. Let's ask old Joe Alt about a hot mic.
Yeah, they're doing the wave. Do the wave.
Okay, good evening, everyone. It is 6 PM, September 16th, 2024, and it's time to call the Franklin City Council meeting to order. Ms. Jones, roll call, please.
Present.
Here.
Ms. McGinnis?
Here.
Ms. Nally?
Here.
Ms. Price?
Here.
Mr. Prime?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brian Reese.
Invite you to join me. Our Father, we come before you this evening. We thank you for the privilege of being here in City Hall. We pray that you would be with this meeting, give all the council members discernment of the good decisions to make for our city and the residents that live here. I pray that you be with our city, be with our state and our country, be with our military as they keep us safe and protect our interests abroad. Thank you for all your goodness and grace and the beautiful weather today. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Let's stand for pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, is there any announcements or public comment that doesn't have anything to do with the agenda? Hearing none, we will go on to the consent agenda.
Move to approve the meeting minutes from August 19th City Council meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, there isn't any old business. We'll go right into the new business.
Move to read new business by title only.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to read new business by title only. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, item number one, introduction of ordinance number 24-05, an ordinance repealing and replacing ordinance number 83-7, defining, regulating, licensing, and governing massage parlors in the city of Franklin. City Attorney Lynn Gray.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm doing two things at once. This has come to us as a collaboration between the planning department as well as the police department. It's been some time ago, I'm looking at you, Joanna, maybe 6 months to a year ago, where there was a countywide raid and operations and some arrests that were made, and it caused us in the planning department to start looking at our ordinance, which had not been, thank you, which had not been revised in some time, and much of it was outdated. So as I am prone to do, I looked at other entities to see what they had done, what had been effective, what hadn't been effective, work with Joanna, and this is a combination of those things. Much of it follows Greenwood. The actual fines and, or not the fines, the actual permit costs are exactly as was previously adopted, but it does utilize some of our police department resources to do background checks and things of that nature to make sure that if there is a business that's operating, number one, we know about it. Number two, it is in an area that is properly zoned. And number three, it complies with all requirements of state and local health department issues. So we already, some may be surprised to know that we already have an ordinance, but I believe it's probably outdated and needed to be addressed, and we've attempted to do that. So it's for introduction only. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you would have, and or if you think of them later on, I'm always available to answer the questions. But it's probably pretty accurate to say this mirrors substantially the Greenwood ordinance that is in effect.
Looks like it covers a lot of bases.
A lot more than I ever thought I would be thinking about, yes. Yes.
Okay, so that one's introduced. We'll go on to the next one. Introduction of ordinance 24-07, an ordinance amending name and duties of the Telecommunications Council. City Attorney Lynn Gray.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. By way of background, back in 2001, this body adopted an ordinance creating the Franklin Telecommunications Council. The reason the ordinance was adopted by the council at that by the Common Council at that time is one of the duties of local municipalities was to participate in the franchising of telecommunications companies, cable companies, and back in the day when people still had phones, that weren't in your hand, telecommunications in that line, landlines and things of that nature. And the local entity had an obligation to franchise those entities. Well, the laws have changed. We don't do that anymore. There aren't any franchisees that we continue to monitor, but we have continued to utilize the services of what is known as the Telecommunications Council to give us advice on what I would say more appropriately, IT information. And I'm looking at Josh because he served on that Telecommunications Council. The Telecommunications Council itself approached me. I go to their meetings once a month, and they were open to the public, approached me and said, would it not be appropriate to reconsider naming us or consider renaming us to accurately reflect what we do? The council was utilized before we had an actual IT department created within the city, which we have, but they work very closely with Rick, run things by him. You've heard me say in times they talk in a geeky language that I often don't understand, have to have them explain it to me, but they are really into some of the more technical things that are needed in the IT department. So this is generated from them, and they felt that the renaming of the, what did I call it? It was their recommendation, the what did I call it?
Telecommunication Council.
To actually now make them from the Telecommunications Council to the actual Franklin Technology Advisory Council, because that's really what they do, is the proposed renaming. The other change to the prior ordinance that was adopted in 2001 is the prior ordinance had a requirement that the Telecommunications Council would report every January as to what things they had done, make a written report to you, come in and talk about the things that they had done. Nobody has ever done that. And quite frankly, these are volunteers that serve. And so I removed that portion and made that they would have to report to you if you requested that you wanted them to report to you. Obviously, you approve their budgets every year, and you do see that. So that's the only two change to the ordinance. Again, happy to answer any questions that you might have. It doesn't change the makeup of the council, nor does it change the $50 payment that they get for their service.
Okay, thank you. That one's introduced, unless somebody has a question. If not, I will go on to number 3, introduction of ordinance 2024-06, amending ordinance 2006-15, illicit discharge and connection stormwater ordinance, and ordinance 2006-16, construction site and post-construction site stormwater control ordinance. Senior planner Joanna Tennell and MS4 coordinator Ty Urban. Don't be shy, Ty. It'll be all right.
She likes to talk.
I like that.
Smart man.
Before you is the introduction of some changes to the two ordinances. Both of those are dealing with stormwater, which is mainly under the purview of Ty Urban through the MS4, and then also works with planning and engineering since it does deal with development. In both of those ordinances, there's requirements that have to be met. Unfortunately, neither of those really outlined a very clear and concise finding and keeping people in check. So that's what this is doing, is it's proposing not only some fines, but it also establishes parameters on first warnings, second warnings, third warnings, and then also goes through and outlines the actual procedures so that if anybody had any questions procedurally, if we followed them, you know, they're all outlined. Ty can give you an example of one that we had recently where the fines would have helped us. Fortunately, the contractor did work with us.
Would you guys like to hear some examples where this would be beneficial moving forward?
Please.
Yes.
Okay, so any site that comes to Franklin that's over 1 acre of disturbed land, they have to get a permit through IDEM. And basically, our office at the MS4, we inspect that site to make sure they comply with that permit that they get from IDEM. We recently had a site, they had a permit for Section 1. It's a residential development. A lot of lots, well, they haven't secured a permit yet for Section 2. And they decided that they were going to start on Section 2 without a permit, moving dirt and stockpiling it. Well, we did have a tech review for Section 2, and they were awaiting their permit, but on that, or in that tech review, there was no stockpiling, nothing, so they just did this on their own. Well, it becomes an issue if IDEM wanted to come on site. One, they're outside of they're only supposed to be on Section 1, so they're outside of their boundary, and then they haven't secured a permit yet for Section 2. And the permit, or the plans that were approved, ultimately didn't even have stockpiles on it. So if they came on site, they would come to our office and wonder, why wasn't this reported to us, or what's the issue here? Miscommunication, what is it? And it all could have been avoided. With the stockpile on a construction site, we like to see a perimeter protection or stabilize if it's dormant 14 days. There was none of that in this set of plans. And then we show up one day and they said that they were gonna start stockpiling dirt there without approval. A better example would be, if you look at the neighborhood you live in, this is more for the spill and illicit discharge side, because I'm sure some people may not be aware of what an illicit discharge is. And let's say whether it's Franklin Lakes, WinStar, Paris Estates, wherever you live, let's say your trash truck goes through there and there's a hydraulic leak, a hose bust or whatever. And we get calls like this very frequent. We come on site, and if I'm on site and the driver is already laying his oil dry, and we talk to him and there's a plan in place, hey, I have help on the way, we're gonna sweep this up, we're not looking to find those incidents, right? It's when that truck decides to drive away and tracks all through the neighborhood, back onto 31 or whatever the major streets are, and then we have to go ask residents, hey, did you see the truck? Do you have a Ring camera? And ultimately, that's kind of how we went about business in the past, and we're hoping that now we can find some of these people for negligence or for when they knowingly violate their permit.
Okay, and I can add to that just a little bit, because I've went with Ty before whenever we were having trouble with, it's mainly, for me, contractors that are building subdivisions or building a industrial site, and they don't put up their silt fence right, and they don't have any repercussions from us. They can just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll take care of that, and then they drive away, and then they never do it.
Yeah.
But if we have a little bit more of a hammer or a little bit more bite, then maybe you don't get to a fine, because they know that if you don't do this, you're going to get fined for it. So that is why we've been working on this, or talking about this for a couple of years, trying to get to where we had more bite to be able to hold them accountable. So,
Yeah. Some of the other issues that you would see with our line of work is tracking in the streets. This would eliminate a lot of that. We try to tell the contractors, all these sites have something that's called a construction entrance. It's got geotextile fabric and then large stone. And the purpose is, when these heavy vehicles leave the site, the dirt falls off the tires into the stone. Well, over time, that becomes more of a road if it's not reinforced and maintained. So we tell them, hey, there's projected rain on Friday, make sure we reinforce this entrance or have a sweeper on site or something. Well, then we get that rain on Friday and there's an event downtown or something, and everybody pulled off site, and tracked through town, and then it's normally us and the street sweeper cleaning it up to try to get it presentable when it all could have been avoided.
and we've also, we can go on about examples.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've
sorry,
also
I'm
had.
taking too much time.
No. We've also had examples of builders, again, subdivisions, not putting up their silt fence, come a big rain, the next thing you know, all the mud's down in the storm sewer, and then we have to fight with them to clean the storm sewer out. I mean, that's a big one too, and we don't release or okay a project until we make sure that's all done. But I just think that there's reasons to do this. It's not just, you can't, I'm talking too much here, because I just want to say you can't trust the contractors.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When IDEM gets involved,
Yeah.
do they push back on you with a penalty?
No, they'll come and look at our documentation. So in our office, we have to submit an annual report every April. And our office gets audited on 6 MCMs, or minimum control measures, and construction and post-construction is one of the things that we have to report on. So they'll come back and they'll look at, okay, I want to see your inspections on this construction site. And, we keep them hard copy and in a, and online. We have a software that we use. Anyway, though, if they came into our office and we didn't have that in place, then it could come on us. But if it's like, no, we've talked to these guys, we've told them. But unfortunately, some of these contractors, like I started in 2016, a lot of the same people that maybe built this neighborhood are doing a neighborhood now. You know, they've just heard the same lines for 8 years now and even beyond when Richard was here. So it's something that's been going on a while. And most of the time, we don't have a problem. They have a job to do. We have a job to do. You know, we respect that and we get it done. But then there's other times where, oh, we've heard this before from this guy. And
And
they
we never do
go,
anything about it because we don't have, what is the old?
Right.
We'll still speak softly and carry a big stick, but we don't have the stick. in this
We
school system.
relied primarily on a stop work order, and that was beneficial, but, you know, and we didn't do it often, but we did it when we had to. Well, the state recently, because people would take advantage of that privilege, it was a couple years ago, but they made it to where you had to give them 72 hours notice. Well, there's a lot that can leave a site in 72 hours for something that could take 3 hours to remediate, you know, whether it's the tracking we talked about or a stockpile getting in the road into the storm conveyance, so.
But I do think, Councilman Shuck, to your point, I do think that IDEM and EPA, not that you're dealing with it, those agencies do get a general sense of what communities try to follow the rules, enforce the rules, do something about it. I catch a lot of that, and we get breaks. When there's discretion that's allowed, they give discretion and grace to those entities that do try to take care of it themselves locally. So while they don't come back and fine us, I think they've been willing to work with us because they do know that we pay attention.
It hasn't been mandated, but has been brought up in some of our audits because there hasn't really been a change. And we're one of the last municipalities in the county to implement a fine ordinance.
There you go.
And how many warnings did you say? How many warnings are you going to have?
Everybody,
They said,
It's on a case-by-case basis. It does state that they can have a warning, but if it is of a substantial nature, we can go straight to a violation.
oh, okay, so that,
Yeah, so it's an option
Yeah.
of warning, and generally, we do that with, you know, something that's minor, or it's a new contractor that's not familiar with our ordinances, but it's, when it's the repeat offenders, that's when we would go straight to a violation and not a warning.
And that's pretty consistent with many of our different ordinances. You know, that while you can do progressive fining, you do not have to if the significant violation is occurring and you need to take immediate action. That's pretty standard.
Say, are these fines big enough for some of these companies that, you know, ultimately if they're continuing to do things, they own their own, it's cheaper to just go the easy route versus, and I'll pay you $250, $250, $500, whatever it happens to be. Are they stiff enough penalties?
It's a per day.
Okay.
So it's compounding.
Okay.
The fines are staged in a manner that's progressively a larger inconvenience, especially with compounding. It's more of the time that it takes for them to then go to their management and explain why they're being fined is really where that action starts. If it was just the amount, I can tell you, no, the amounts are never enough to dissuade them. But those conversations with the bosses on asking them to fork over money is when that ends up being helpful.
I may be wrong, but I don't foresee us fining very many people after we have this in place. I mean, once you have it there, and people usually come around.
And once you find one time, the word gets out that we're not just a mouthpiece saying, oh, we're
Right.
going to fine you.
looks like you have a stop work order also.
Yes.
They can just stop the whole project.
And we've even had, I remember the gentleman arguing with us on that one until we had to show him, no, you're shut down, buddy.
yeah, there's a few of those. They like to test you.
Yeah.
And now, like I said, they get 72 hours to play that game. But if there's an active discharge, though, we can't shut them down right then. But
And Ty is wonderful at doing exactly that with a smile, just like he did.
Yeah.
We're going to shut you down. And he smiles. And he is, yeah, he's a wonderful employee in that regard. You do a great job.
appreciate it.
And we really don't want to do that, just so everybody knows. We don't go out looking to shut people down. We don't want to do that. We want to keep progress going, you know, so.
Is there an advantage, so so hypothetically speaking, if there are 3 sections in this development, right?
Yeah.
And they are going to just start with section 1, can they go ahead and do, like for drainage purposes, do all sections to control, right? Like, because if they're only
It depends on the
moving for-
project.
Okay.
For example, in West Wind at Cumberland, they started with section 1 with the overall physical development of all the lots, all the infrastructure. However, due to the overall size of that development, they did include the dirt work for section 2 also and the drainage. So in that one, the erosion control plan did include all of section 1 and section 2, even though they did have to come back to us with additional detail for the actual construction of the streets, the sewers, the storms. So it depends on the project. Sometimes they are included and the erosion control plan then reflects that. If it didn't, then we wouldn't allow them to do that.
But if they include 2 sections,
Yeah,
it could
that's fine.
help,
Yep.
right?
The premise for that one was, we have 3 parties that are all on the same page, the city, IDEM, and the developer. But then when one party acts
Sure.
alone and without notifying the other 2 parties, that's where it gets, you know, they just didn't have a permit. Like she said, the other site, they included it all, it was fine. And this one could have been worked with, they just, like I said, it's hard the day of, you're telling us what you're gonna do.
Sure.
And then,
Anybody else? Okay, this one's introduction. Thank you.
thank you guys.
Okay, next item, we can do this one tonight. Request approval of Council Budgetary Resolution 2411, transfer from the Park Services to Park Supplies, an amount of $20,000. Parks Superintendent Chip Horner.
Thank you, sir. This is not new money. We're just asking to transfer money from 300 to 200. And a couple of reasons why, just to keep you up to date. One is we have hired a maintenance supervisor in the parks that actually does citywide stuff. He has become so good at it that I'm hiring less people from the outside to do stuff, and we do more internal stuff now, which means I buy the stuff instead of a contractor. So I need more money to buy stuff so he can continue to fix stuff. And then the other one is, after 18 years, we're going to get smart, and we're not going to try to paint a swimming pool in April when it rains. We're going to do it right now when it's nice outside. Wow. So that's the other money we're going to spend, is actually going to paint the pool this fall. So that's what the money's for.
Interesting. I make a motion to approve budgetary resolution 24-11.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next item, introduction of the 2025 budget, Forms 1 and the summary. It's what it is. Tonight's introduced to our budget. Next meeting will be public hearing, and then the third meeting after that would be hopefully approval. So is there any questions from anybody about the budget that we've introduced? Just for the record, how we start with this, first thing I do is get with our consultant on what's our projected revenue, and then get with department heads and clerk treasurer's office and go through expenses and, okay, what's our budget gonna look like? What do we need? How much is the things going up? And it's already based off of our revenue that we have, that we're gonna get, by Jeff Peters. And then I meet with city council and no more than 2 at a time, and we go through the budget, and any questions that we have is answered there. And then we introduce what we've talked about. So it's introduced, it's on the agenda here, and any questions from anybody on the board that sees anything different than what we talked about. And then the next meeting will be a public hearing, so if anybody in the audience has any questions, they'll be more than welcome at the public hearing to question the process or question a line item or what you see. So it's introduced. Next item would be the introduction of the budgetary ordinance 24-20, the 2025 salaries for all city employees. The salaries are in the budget, so you take the budget that we just introduced and take the salaries out and put the salary ordinance in, and that's a separate ordinance to be passed. It's also introduced tonight, so any questions from the council?
Mayor, may I give some context? And Jan, please too. The clerk treasurer's duty is to prepare the salary ordinance for introduction and consideration by the council. We all know mayor's job to do the budget, council approves the budget, and then the clerk treasurer's office administers the budget. So that's the interplay of those three branches, if you will, of government. One of the things as you also know, we have been working with an HR consultant for the intent of revising and updating our employee manual. I think that was one of the first things that Jan started. We've been meeting consistently to do that, to introduce the employee manual, and it's taken a long time. That's a big project.
It is a big
It's a huge project. One of the things in the course of that context of meeting with her, the HR consultants have said that the salary ordinance needs to include every portion of how an employee is paid and everything, every benefit. Thank you, Jan. Every benefit that is paid, which is more than just salary. So what Jan has been tasked with doing is creating that salary ordinance that pulls from our existing employee manual. That's why I keep saying existing employee manual, and put in the ordinance all of the benefits that are paid. So the intent of this salary ordinance is not changing any of those benefits. It is putting out here what they are. Now, I will be honest with you, I don't know that they've always been administered by the various departments in the way that they are intended to be done, but what is in this salary ordinance is what is currently in existence. There is no changes. Now, there may be some when the employee manual is changed in the future, but that's a discussion for another day. So that is the intent of this salary ordinance. In the event that you are contacted by anyone, please encourage people to be contacting their council representatives. But there is nothing in here that's changing our benefit plans. It is just putting it out there, so.
And just another part of that, whenever it is changed, or it would go through the council to get the handbook changed.
The handbook would, first, the process is, and Jan, please speak up. She's been doing all the heavy lifting on this. It's been a huge project for the clerk treasurer to take it on. The process would be, once we get a draft, then it will be gone to the department heads to get reviews, to get feedback from them. Then we'll have something that's been circulated amongst the department heads and the employees. Then it will come to you to adopt it finally. And then if it is adopted, and if it does change, now the employee manual obviously deals with a lot more things. How many pages have we looked at? 78, 79? Yeah, it seems like the employee manual obviously is lengthy, deals with the myriad of issues that you would have, some of which are benefits. Once it gets adopted, and if it does change any of the benefit packages, or it doesn't change the salary amounts, but the benefits, then we would amend the salary ordinance in accordance with whatever the employee manual is. It doesn't make sense to hold up the whole budget process because we may very well be first quarter of next year before we adopt the new employee manual. We obviously need a budget before that time. So that's why I'd make it very clear that the intent of the salary ordinance is simply to put in writing what is currently in our employee manual regarding benefits.
I think it's good to, obviously before we had never, or the city had never displayed it like this, but I think it's good for the council to see. I think it's good for employees to see exactly what every single benefit is, besides just their salary. So that's what this ordinance shows in all 100 pages.
And there were, on the one that you see here, there were a few words that we needed to change. Typographical, it's updated. The link's updated. So what you probably had hand delivered to you last Thursday has some typographical changes and things. Like I said, it's been a work in progress that we're working on. So some of those changes were made.
Okay, any questions? If not, it's introduced. There isn't any other business. We'll go into council member comments. How about we start with the Mayor's Youth Council first? Ella, do you have any updates?
Yesterday, we had our pickleball tournament, which is helping us raise money for the pickleball lights. We raised $857, and right now we are in the mix of creating a timeline for that project, so, yeah.
Okay, thank you. You want to introduce your fellow members?
Sure. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves? Okay, that's Lizzie Worland, that's Taylor Trueblood, and that's Kelly Cadwell.
Thank you. Glad you guys are here.
Ella, take charge.
Jennifer?
Nothing, thank you.
Irene?
No, nothing for me tonight, sir.
Todd?
No, sir.
Come on, Sean.
No, sir.
I have nothing, thank you.
Ann?
No, thank you.
Josh?
Nothing.
Jan? Lynn?
No.
I have nothing else. We need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Bye.
Thank you.